Well, awesome. Welcome, everybody. I can't tell you how excited I am by both the wines that we're going to be drinking, but also the person that we're speaking with today. I am joined by Veronique Bosturin, obviously of Burgundy and of Oregon. And I think you're coming to us from Burgundy today on this wonderful Earth Day.
Yes, on this wonderful Earth Day, it's lovely to see you, Greg. Yes, I am in Beaune. I am in Burgundy. I wish I
It's
could be in Oregon, but it's not very easy to travel at the moment.
not yet, but I have this strong positive sense that it's coming soon. Both of our countries seem to be ultimately getting things in order, and it'll free us up so that we can see each other in person. But at least what is wonderful, and probably actually has a smaller carbon footprint, is that we're able to see each other this way, virtually, with so many people. And it's wonderful to see the response to this webinar. And everyone, welcome. We're going to get wine in your glass, no matter what your time zone is. If you're out west, thanks for tasting early. On the East Coast here, it's a beautiful day, if a bit cold. But I can't say how happy I am to be tasting these wines. Veronique and I met right at the beginning of Forum. And I think it's one of the things about wine is that it creates friendships and it helps start a relationship. And we've known each other since the very beginning, 2013, I think.
I think so. In San Francisco. In San Francisco. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. And then again back in Burgundy, and you were the pioneer of the use of Coravin in Burgundy. Hello from Pennsylvania. It's I think that one of the special things about Burgundy are the people. And it's true of most wine regions, but of Burgundy, I think in particular. And that you are so deeply involved in the production of your wines as the head of Jura. But I think it's that connection that you have with the land and with the wines, and then also out in the world marketing your wines and introducing people to them that don't yet know. You're a very special individual, and I know that we all and everybody who's attending knows this if they've had the chance to meet you. So welcome. I'm going to do something weird for Coravin guy. I'm going to pull a cork. So I want to get wine into your glasses. If you've purchased a set already, then you should start drinking or tasting as well. But we introduced it with our new pivot, which I'll speak about a little bit. Coravin, as you know, is famous, well, in its small way for pouring wine from a bottle without opening it. But then, we're not absolutists, so we decided that we wanted to also offer a way of pouring from an open bottle that was faster, easier, more conservative on gas, which is important on Earth Day. And so we came up with a pivot. The pivot pours from an open bottle of wine. You simply place the pivot stopper into the top of the bottle once you've opened it. It seals really well. And then you place this nice little tube into the glass. Put the bottle sideways, just like with Coravin. Press the button, gas goes in. It's the same argon gas we use for the normal system. Stop pouring anytime simply by tipping up and stopping pressing. I like to give the pivot a little bit of a shake as I take it out, get rid of any drops, and then close it, and you can put it back in your fridge or wine cellar and drink it again whenever. Actually, up to a month, and we're first trying to extend that because we're Coravin. But the first one we're tasting is the 2018 Domaine Jura from Dundee Hills Pinot Noir. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your Oregon, extraordinary Oregon vineyards, and this wine in particular, but also what it was that started you on your journey to grow Pinot Noir away from your hometown?
That goes back before Coravin existed. And I actually wish it did exist at the time, because I've been traveling a lot with the wine, and it would have been great to be able to use the Coravin. But the connection with Oregon for me goes back to 1986, where I was wonderfully welcomed by the pioneers of Oregon, David Lake and his family, David Adelsheim, the Castile family. I was just doing a stage. I wanted to have an experience in a new world. I have been trained in Dijon. Of course, I'm lucky to live in Burgundy. And then I thought, gee, it would be nice to have an experience. And I thought of California because we had lots of connection, and one of them was Robert Mondavi. But it's my dad who said, Veronique, you should go to Oregon because I have tried some amazing Pinot. So this is 86, and nobody knows about Oregon or wine being produced there. And so I went and I had the most wonderful time. And then we became friends with these pioneers, wonderful people. And they encouraged my father to do something, which my dad replied, I would love to because I really believe into Oregon, but I don't have the time. I can't make wine in Burgundy because the time zone is very similar. And so it didn't happen for a year, but the following year, in June of 87, we got a phone call from David Alsan who said, Robert, there's a beautiful piece of property for sale next to David Lett, whom I have to say is the first man who planted Pinot Noir in Oregon in 1965.
Wow.
So that goes way back.
Yeah.
And so he said, let's go. So we went, and arriving there, he said, if you are willing to take care of this place and make the wine, I think we should try. And so we bought a totally empty hill. It had a few trees which we left, but there was nothing, no vineyards. And so we started from there, from scratch. And it has been an amazing adventure journey with a lot of help from the local people. And, you know, the stem was Dick Iras and the Sokol-Blosa family, all these people who were willing to share their little experience. And of course, my dad, who shared a lot of his experience from Burgundy. But the idea was not to copy what we do in Burgundy in Oregon. It was just being inspired with what we do. So it's Pinot Noir growing in Oregon. So maybe also a few words about where it's growing. So this is fruit coming from the original property, DDO, which is on the Dundee Hills AVA. And the Dundee Hills AVA is the first AVA that was named as such. And this is where it all started, the first vine of Pinot. It's 28 miles southwest of Portland. It's 40 miles inland from the ocean. It's not that far. And it's protected from the coastal range. So it makes a very interesting microclimate for Pinot with a tricky grape variety. So you get these warm days, but cool nights. And the reason Oregon is doing extremely well for Pinot, one of the reasons is the climate. You get the perfect climate for this variety. And then, of course, the soil is fascinating because it's not limestone like Burgundy. It's volcanic soil.
Yeah,
so it's just something extremely interesting, but I think also very good. So what we have is the 2018, which was a very good vintage. It's a warm year. I would say it's a classic vintage. It was warm. So we had to be careful with how we handle the fruit.
Wow.
I should let you describe the wine, Greg.
Oh my goodness.
I like it.
You know, I don't know that you were, I was going to ask the question whether you were trying to bring Burgundy to Oregon when you moved there. And I very much respect that it was going to be Burgundy inspired. And I have to say, this is very Burgundy inspired. It is, I'm an absolute fan of Oregon Pinot Noir. And the first Oregon Pinot Noir that I had was from your vines because it was a gift, and I happen to have the bottle here. But when I was making the original prototypes of Coravin, they were called Wine Mosquito back then, before we started the company. My kids named it Wine Mosquito. And this was maybe 2008 or 9. I work in medicine, and I ran into a surgeon friend of mine, and he saw me using the original prototypes of the Wine Mosquito. He's from Eugene, Oregon. And he said to me, can I buy one of those prototypes from you? And I said, no, I don't accept money for these prototypes. But you can pay me in wine if you like. And I gave him the one that I had. And I said, just send me what you think it's worth. And he sent me a half case of Drouhin Magnums.
Oh my goodness.
And this is one of the remaining bottles. This is an 06 Drouhin Louise. That I'm really looking forward to tasting. I have not tasted this since 2018, and I tasted it first back in 2012.
Wow.
So it's been going for a long time, and it convinced me that Oregon was a place where great Pinot Noir could be made. So when I smell this, first of all, the color is gorgeous. I mean, who doesn't love the color of great Pinot? It's beautiful, transparent. You know, not like what you see further south in California where it can get kind of dark because the fruit is so ripe. But this is, on the nose, it's great. It's floral. I'm getting a lot of flowers that I did not expect on the nose. I was expecting more fruit, but I'm getting more floral, almost the smell that you get from clover. And then when I taste it, beautiful fruit, but still great acidity. It's super balanced. It's light on the palate, which would be great with food. You know, and I'm not sure, they always say what grows together goes together. I don't know what Oregon makes in terms of food. I only drink their wine. But I would imagine that this would be delicious with cheese, with mushrooms, with something earthy, because there's an earthiness to this wine as well. And I don't know what it's like. What do you think the impact of the different soils is? Not to get too geeky, but volcano versus what you've got in Burgundy, what impact does that have on the wines?
Well, it does have an impact, but you would think it could be even more important than it actually is. I'm not saying that we would be always confusing the wines from Burgundy and Oregon. I would say that in general, the Oregon Pinots tend to have this very unique and fascinating spiciness, which I adore. And what is important is to try and what is Pinot about? It's a wine that is generally not extremely dark in color. It's not extremely structured as a variety. Doesn't give you a lot of tannin. So you have to be respectful of the fruit and not try to take too much of it to make a very elegant and refined wine. And I think we achieve that in Oregon on this volcanic soil. But they do have this lovely color, spicy character, which you kind of said floral, earthy notes. That's very, very typical of Oregon Pinot. Something I really like also from Oregon Pinot is we call it in French, le grain du tanin, the grain, the structure, the impression on the palate. Yeah. It's nothing edgy, but it has a good ampleness. It has nice volume, and yet it's never dry or it's never. I really like this, and also they age very well.
There's also a texture with the wine on the palate that is not tannin, right? It doesn't feel tannic, but there's a texture to it that is really lovely, and it makes the finish more complex. And so you sit, and what I love about great wines is when, you know, they sit in the glass and they change over time. You know, there are some wines that are made so linearly that it's like a laser. That's the one flavor you're going to get, and you're not going to get anything else no matter how long you leave it. This wine already has so many different flavors of the fruit and the spice. It's lovely. I wanted to ask Dundee versus Eola Hills, or Eola Hills. What, I always mispronounce that. Is there a big difference in the style of Pinot that comes from those two different subregions of Oregon?
There's definitely a difference. And before we go to the Eola wine, the rosewood wine, I had two good comments from Margaret, who said one good pairing with Oregon Pinot is salmon. She's right. It's something I discovered there. But Pinot Noir and salmon, normally you think fish and white wine, but it's a very, very good match. It really is a good combination. And the second thing she was saying is acidity. It's true that Oregon Pinot has this natural acidity to start with. Actually, the Chardonnay does too, which are, of course, components that are important in the balance of the wine and for the aging of the wine. Now, to come back to your question about Eola, maybe we should taste the wine.
We can pour a little bit into the glass and still taste the first as well. Here I am.
Maybe we should, so we can sort of compare them.
Yeah.
Eola is a newer AVA in the Willamette Valley. Of course, these are all in the Willamette Valley. Eola comes from the Eol, the wind, and it is definitely a region, an area of Oregon that gets a little more wind flowing through the valley, making it an interesting fact that the grapes ripen a little later, and the acidity is even a little higher. I normally pick the fruit from Eola almost 1 week after I pick the fruit from Dundee. I mean, I don't pick all the fruit in Dundee in 1 week. But generally speaking, I start picking in Eola 1 week after, which is great, 1 week after Dundee Hill. So it's a site that gives you wine with a little bit more structure. I like to say Dundee is for me more like in the world of Chambol Musigny, And Iola is more in the world of Gevrey-Chambertin, because you will see the wine tend to have a little more dried fruit and a little more structure. So I love it because there is terroir and we are finding them, defining them, but it takes time. I mean, it took a couple centuries here in Burgundy, so we won't pretend we discover them that quickly, but we start
Maybe
to
so.
see differences.
Clearly, you're not too far off the mark. I mean, these wines are spectacular. I'm so glad that your wine was my first Oregon Pinot Noir because it completely convinced me. And I have to admit, the next two wines were more of a letdown than I expected. I'm glad you said Chambol, because I would agree. That's just such a beautiful, pretty wine from Dundee. And I did taste this. I have to admit, I've been using my standard Corvin on these bottles since they arrived because I love them. And they're great with food. Salmon, what a good idea. And I'm going to try that because that makes an enormous amount of sense. The thing that I have to imagine is that the learning of a new vineyard, do you find that like in Burgundy, there are vineyards that are so small that there are a few tennis courts in size, and the wine from just a few rows over is very different from one direction or the other because of microclimates and the soils are so different. Do you find that that's also true in Oregon, that it'll take a lot of time to learn the individual regions and subregions of the vineyards themselves? Or is it more uniform across the vineyards?
No, I think it will take time. Maybe it's not as much time as it took here, but it will take time to nail down to our little microclima or to our clima like we would have here, Amoureuse and Bonne-Mare and Musnier and all of these parcels. But definitely we now do see the fact that the vines are in the 25 to 30 years old, and you see differences coming year after year, means it's not only due to the climate or to the clone or to the rootstock, it really is the soil. Because if you have consistency in the style of the wine, no matter the style of the vintage, that means it comes from the soil. So it's really interesting. And so we start to have our little favorite blocks or blocks that are okay, I need to make sure I keep this one on its own because potentially it could be a Louise or a Lorraine. It is quite a fascinating learning process.
Oh, I've got to imagine. And one of the things that you're quite well known for is the sustainability that you've built in Burgundy, and I think the whole region is moving toward more sustainability, like wine in general. I like to believe, and also the sort of move toward biodynamic, which is almost one step further, I think, in then sustainability. It's stopping the fight between humans and nature and trying to incorporate nature into the growth of wine, which is the part of biodynamics I like the most. I'm always confused by the calendar, but but I still love what it does to the wines. I've had the privilege of tasting either side of somebody who went from non-biodynamic to biodynamic and tasting the wines before and after, and how different they are. Did you, from the start, as you were working in Burgundy on moving towards sustainability and biodynamics, did you mirror that activity in Oregon? And does it have the same general trend of effect on the wines that are produced?
It's a little different situation because Burgundy has a long history of grain grapes. And then sadly in the 50s, there was this massive use of pesticides, herbicides, chemicals, fertilizer, which did not happen in Oregon. And that's the beauty of Oregon. So we don't have the background. Well, yes, we don't have the background of Burgundy, but we are very lucky that we kind of start with very clean soil. And so it's much easier in Oregon to move to sustainability because you have, well, first you have less disease problem and less disease pressure and less weather, dramatic climatic conditions that we have in Burgundy. But the good news is in Burgundy is a big move to sustainability. So my brother was very concerned about the fact that we should be more sustainable from the mid-80s. And in the mid-80s, it sounds odd to do that. Yeah. But he was not the only one. Aubert de Villaine and Dominique Lafont and Frédéric Lafarge and Claude Lefebvre, this group of people were saying, this is wrong. We need to do something different here. And that is how that group started to be very smart and talk together and go more sustainable. There's still progress to do because we see the climate change And then there was a lot of question on the climate change. How do we adapt to that? Last week we had this terrible frost. There's nothing we could
I'm
do.
so
Albert
sorry.
Villene called me last night and said, Veronique, we need to work on that. And I said, agree. We all tried things, and I think we will need to adapt. The vines we kind of adapt to themselves, but there's things we can do, and we are trying to do that to be more sustainable. And then of course the biodynamic, organic farming, and then biodynamic farming is one step, because we use no chemicals in the vineyards, which is really good for the water resources. Today is Earth Day, and one of my concerns, and I think everybody's concern, is the quality of water. Well, when you don't put this stuff in the soil, it's good for the plant, it's good for the soil, it's good for the life that is in the soil, it's good for the water resources. So these little steps are important. We still can improve on carbon footprint, and when we ferment wine, the CO2 going into the atmosphere, how could we capture that? So there are things to do. But Oregon, of course, we're on the move to do the same. It's just
Yeah, I think it's the right move. I come from medicine, and I think we learned that lesson. I was working with someone who developed pharmaceuticals at one of my early jobs, and the company that I was with was famous for antibiotics and for making antibiotics. And he said to me, "We're doing the largest biological warfare experiment in the planet's history with antibiotics in animals and also in people." And he said, in the end, nature wins. And he said, we have to stop. We need to pull back. And I think it's a very strong corollary to the use of chemicals against pests and fungus and everything else. And like you were saying, with the water, with the workers, the people that work the vineyards, with the families that live around, we've been in this battle against nature. And if anybody who's on the webinar, feel free to ask questions anytime. But if you have the chance to go and see a vineyard that is cultivated in an organic or biodynamic way next to a vineyard that is not, it is the most convincing thing about biodynamic and organic, is to see the health of the vineyards and the ground between the vines relative to something where there's a chemical warfare going on. And I think sometimes science is great, like with this pandemic and the vaccines, and thank goodness. But sometimes we can take it too far. And I think as a human species, I'm really hoping that Earth Day reminds us to back off every once in a while and learn to interact with nature rather than fight it, because we are actually part of nature. I noticed there's a tree behind you. I really want to taste this one. I haven't tasted it yet, but you'd mentioned that you were planning on planting the tree for Earth Day, and I just thought that was so fantastic. And you're planting it in one of my favorite vineyards that you have.
Yeah, I thought it was important to do something, and I thought, what am I going to do on Earth Day? And I'm trying to incite people to plant more trees. So every time, in the vineyards, we try to plant trees. We planted one in the Clos des Mouches with my brothers recently. Everywhere we can plant trees, I think we should. So I thought, this is a little elm tree that will go to my garden, but I thought this is how I was going to celebrate Earth Day.
I like it. We at Corbin are trying to become more sustainable. You'll notice our packaging is shrinking and turning into recycled paper. Pivot, for example, is entirely recycled paper, cardboard. There's no plastic in the packaging. We've shrunk it. It's remarkable how the shrinking of packaging has an impact on shipping and carbon footprint. Really, it's something I didn't comprehend, and it's both less expensive and better for the environment. I know that Jancis Robinson has been speaking a lot about the weight of bottles, and she's on a tear to decrease the weight of the bottle. There's this perception that there's greater value in a heavier bottle. And so, from the customer standpoint, they think heavier is better, but from an environmental standpoint, the thinner and the lighter, the better.
Yeah, if you think every time you bottle are being transported worldwide, it's crazy. Our bottle from Burgundy, and we're hoping to try to be able to work with that bottle. But we had a bottle specifically designed for Drouin, which was going the total opposite of people with heavy bottles, because you think heavy, the wine will be better. There's no relationship, but when you have a heavy bottle, it just seems like, oh, it's going to be great wine. We're going the opposite way, and we save 60 grams per bottle. But, at the end, on a couple million bottles after a couple of years, it's a lot of weight that you haven't transported. So it's just a small, and this is something we don't talk about, but we just wanted to try and be more sustainable. And so the bottle is a bit lighter. So
it's a mindset, I think, that you can take in every aspect of the way that you do business. And I'm now very seriously reconsidering the amount of flying that we all did, because that too, right? I miss it. I miss being in Burgundy, and I'm sure that I will continue my flying. But I tried to offset my flying with my electric car, which I will be driving. And I know that that you also have now a Tesla. And I see that technology spreading, and I see our government's response. This is a really good thing. I wanted to speak about the wine. It is exactly as you described. Well, I don't know why I would doubt it. It's a little bit darker in color. This is the Rose Rock that I'm having from Eola Amini. And it's just a shade darker in color. It's got that richness on the palate, is just like Chambertin. I think that's the perfect comparative description. If you like Gevrey, you're going to love this. And if you love this, you're going to like Gevrey. You should buy yourself some. Chambertin is the way you should go. It works in both directions. If you're an Oregon fan, you should try something from Burgundy. You'll be impressed.
Absolutely.
Oh, smells.
And I saw a question about barrels. Which barrels do we use? So we actually do use the same barrels in Oregon as we do in Burgundy. We have started many years ago to sort of control how the oak is being dried before it is given the shape of the barrel. And so I'm lucky that I can use some of that inventory of oak. We don't make the barrel, but we dry the oak for 2 to 3 years. And then the cooper makes the barrel. And so I can take some of that inventory to Oregon, which is great. And I also work with coopers, and I buy direct through them. So I use classic French oak barrels. I'm very careful with the toastiness. I don't take, it's usually light to medium toast. And I don't go big on new oak. I'm about 20% new oak. I've tried less, I've tried more. But to me, I find it's the right balance for the wines.
Yeah, it's lovely. This one has more texture, more depth, a little bit more of a richness, but and the elegance is from the Dundee Hills, they're both absolutely delicious. They're mouthwatering. I hope everybody else is drinking along with us, because this is a perfect side-by-side comparison. This is why I invented Coravin. I wanted to be able to do this, taste 2-3 wines from a producer and really understand what those differences were. Did you find that the way that you manage the vineyards is the same in the two regions? And I think maybe as an addition to that, with global warming coming, what have been the differences in the impact of global warming that you've seen on Oregon versus Burgundy?
The management of the vineyard, to answer your first question, is similar, although the density of plantation is higher in Burgundy. You know, Burgundy has one of the highest in the world. We have 10,000 vines per hectare. Oregon, on average, is 4,500, and DDO is more. It's 7,500. But overall, the management is the same over the road tractor, and the goal to the yield that we shoot would be like a Premier Cru in Burgundy, so 40 to 45 hectoliters per hectare. And that is important, because with Pinot, if you go too high, then boom, the quality drops quickly. You don't need to be really low, like 15 or 10 hectoliters per hectare. I think this year, sadly, with the frost we got, this is what we will reach, but this is not our wish. Yeah, so the farming is quite similar. Now, on the climate change, in both places, we noticed first that we peak earlier, and I think it's true all over the world, but certainly we have noticed it in Burgundy. Lately, it has been late August, early September, mid-September that we peak, which when I was a kid, it was always late September to beginning of October. So we do need to adapt to that. We haven't gone too much in the problem of alcohol here. I would say we cannot complain. We should complain about the climate change, but we can't complain too much to the fact that in Burgundy, lately we've picked ripe fruits, healthy fruits at perfect ripeness. So no chocolarization is required. We still have good acids. So it has been easier to make wine. But if I could press on the stop button, like on the rise of the...
We could pause right here. Would be good. Maybe with a little less frost.
a lot less frost, less, yeah, because the climatic accidents are extremely violent. The frost, I mean, it has happened in the past, but such as the one we got was, I think, 30 years ago. 91 was the last time we had a big frost. It was -7, -8, so not that cold, but the growth of the vine is starting earlier than before. The frost always has been around that time, so it's nothing new here. But the problem is the vines start to grow earlier. And so when the frost arrives, it's a disaster. Plus, we got a little bit of snow this second night. We got 3
I
nights in a
saw
row.
that. Your pictures were fantastic. I mean, it was so beautiful and yet so sad.
Yeah, it was close, exactly. It was sad, but it was incredibly beautiful. And each of those lights is one person that lit them. And so you can imagine everyone was out there and like helping each other. And it was, it's a great moment. But the reason why we do that, sometimes it's very efficient and you think, yeah, we succeeded. But this year with the snow on the second night, I think there's going to be a lot of damage. We don't know how bad because we need to wait and see. The vines can be very resilient. So they might grow with the second bad.
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah, we could do.
It would be great. With Oregon, you don't see frost. With Oregon, you don't see hail. That's
No,
not an issue.
you can have some, but it's very rare. You can have a little bit of frost, but usually the vines, every vineyard is on slopey hills, so the cold air goes down. So it's not a problem. And hail occasionally a little bit, but I've never, I mean, touch wood, I
Yeah, well, this is a good thing. I mean, and Oregon has fires, which can be terrible.
But last year we had big fires, which was not fun. No, that was something I don't hope we get here. So.
No, it reminds me of California. I have a son who lives in Los Angeles, and he says it's fire season. And I said, "What season is that?" He says it's now 12 months a year.
Oh, really?
It's always fire season in California. That's their big shift. Yeah. So I hope you guys have these wines. If you don't, you should get them. But this is a perfect comparison across, and I can't actually wait to taste the Lorraine. And I have the feeling these are named after your children.
Yes. So Lorraine is my oldest daughter. She was born in 92, and I was making the wine and actually did not know I was pregnant. And so she was a very early baby because I did a lot of punch down and, of course, falling off the ladders, the usual life of a winemaker. And so 92. But the reason we came up with I would say, a reserve cuvée, I might open the bottle as I speak, is because after the first vintage for DVO is 88. So we don't have vineyards. We buy grapes from different AVAs, from different growers. We make the wine, and 89 the same. And then 1990, we get our first fruit from the young vines of DVO. And then 91, and then 92, same. We still buy fruit and we make wine from the property. And then tasting the wines with my father, who was maybe 25 to 28 different cuvées, we both say, wow, some of these wines are really stunning. I mean, there's difference between those wines. Maybe we should not blend all of them. And so we came up with one small blend of what we thought was the best, and the other one that we thought was really good, but the other one was more complex, more refined. And we got this wine, 92 bottle, and we got it for 2 years in the cellar with no name. And finding the name for wine is not easy. And the manager of DVO at the time, Bill Hatcher, he said, Vero, this wine was made when you were pregnant of Lorraine. It's a lovely name. Maybe you could name it like this. And I said, well, that's fine with me. The family agrees. And that's how we got the Cuvée Lorraine. So it's sort of what people sometimes wonder about this wine is it a vineyard selection or is it a barrel selection? Well, it has been for a long time a vineyard selection. When I say a barrel selection, it's really tasting the wine for the whole year. And at the end, you go back to your notes and you say, wow, this one always got the little star, always got the best tasting note. And we came up with this. And the idea with Lorraine is to make wine that is refined and complex and also has a great ageability. And I have to say 92 is still drinking well because I kept some for Lorraine.
Oh my goodness, I was going to ask you, what's the oldest vintage that still remains of your wines in Oregon? I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like to taste wines that you've been...
All of them, actually.
All of them. Oh my God.
Actually, still, I have a library of all of them. The only vintage that was very, very difficult is 97. And those didn't age very well. It was very hard as a vintage. but all the vintages age very well.
Wow, that is spectacular. I have to admit, I went old school and used the original Coravin on this wine. And it's because I don't plan to finish this within the next month. Pivot, I'm going to finish in the next month. With this one, I think I'm going to be waiting a little while because it's such a complex wine. It's almost a little smoky on the nose. As it first came out of the Coravin, I could smell.
And this is 2017 vintage. It's a range of really good vintages. The picking time was about the same. 18 was a bit warmer than 17. And I really like the fact that the 17s are extremely refined. They're very elegant. We say finesse. There's a lot of finesse in the 17 wines. And I have to say, Greg, your Coravin, when we spoke about sustainability, it's helping saving a lot of wine. On my side, I know I get the question, why do you use Coravin? Do you use personally and professionally? And I do both. I would say personally, because sometimes I'm in the mood of having a wine from Italy or Spain, or Oregon, California, or Bordeaux, or whatever. And so I can get a glass and I'm cooking if my husband is not here. So, or if we want to try different wines. And then professionally, I use it a lot because we have sometimes very, very small crops. And even if we do have a normal crop, the Grand Cru, as you know, production is very small. So if I have 10 people coming over a month or two, and I would like them to taste the Musigny, I can't open 30 bottles of Musigny.
No.
So I'm using your Coravin a lot because it's really saving me a lot of wine, but it allows me to get people to try one that they normally won't taste. And then also, one news for me, which is great, if I have an event, and I need to send 6 bottles, I want to make sure they're perfect. I will cover a little bit of the wine to make sure there's not corked or no problem. And I tell them, use those bottles because once they've been in the cover, I don't want someone to buy it and have a surprise or whatever. But honestly, thank you very much because for me,
it was not an anticipated use of Coravin other than in your home, but it is the one that makes me so happy. I know that we met right after we had founded the company, and I see the old school Coravin behind you, and I know that that's one of the first serial numbers that we made because we went to Burgundy because we thought how important Burgundy was. Exactly.
My collector, I love it. Give this one to me.
Yes, I remember it very, very well, and it's something that made me so happy was to see that it was useful in the vineyard. We're seeing a question here. Pinot is aged in both new and natural. Okay, that's a. See which we feel. Okay, that's correct. I had 2 questions for you. This is stunning, by the way. And if you have not had Lorraine or what I'm going to be trying, Louise as well, and I'll tell you a little story about that beyond the gift from my surgeon friend, Glenn Kuiper, who's an incredible lover of your wine and Oregonian wine in general, and an advocate. He said he was going to leave surgery and he wanted to be my Coravin representative in Oregon so that he could go around to all the wineries. And he's a very, very good spine surgeon. So if you need surgery in Eugene, Oregon, he's a great guy. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, your family is now making, you are now making some of the best wines of Burgundy, which is saying a lot, and some of the best wines of Oregon. If there was another place that you would pick where you would want to grow wine, and have you thought of it, where would that be? Where do you think there is territory? I mean, I think Oregon is one of the best Pinot growing territories, as you do, as of course is Burgundy. But is there another place that you see around the world where there's an opportunity to make excellent Pinot Noir?
Yes, I've always loved the wines of New Zealand. I think New Zealand, if I was younger, if I had more time, because our problem is we do make the wine. It's not joint venture. Didio is not joint venture. My brother is in charge of the vineyard. I make the wine, of course, with the help of Aaron, my assistant, but we are hands-on. But if I did have the time, I would go to New Zealand. The problem is New Zealand, we couldn't go further from Burgundy is New Zealand. It's very far. But I've had really, really good wines. I think New Zealand is
unbelievable.
A very good place. Yeah.
I agree completely. And I also love the wines from Adelaide Hills and what they're trying to do in Adelaide Hills in Australia, north of Adelaide. Some of the wines that they're making, very different style, but there are some natural winemakers there that are making some really interesting Pinot Noir. and Tasmania. But I have to say that New Zealand is, it's one of these magical lands that clearly has a fantastic prime minister who got everything under control very early. We all have a lot of respect for her and what she achieved. Do you think that that either one of your or of the daughters for whom these wines are named would ever travel to New Zealand to think about doing Drouin in New Zealand?
Well, maybe the exciting news is, so I am the fourth generation. Josette was my great grandfather, then it was Maurice, then Robert, and then my brothers and I, because of course I'm not the only one in the family. I work with my brothers, and now my daughter Lorraine, actually, this little Lorraine, she joined the family in October of last year. So
congratulations.
She has a really disposition to taste. She's a great palate, and she did a business school and then went to the Lycée Viticole to learn about viticulture. She loves it. She helped Didio. She made actually the 17 we are having. She helped me. She was one of my interns, so she helped me. That was the 25th anniversary of Lorraine. So she helped me do mine. So we're super excited, and maybe one of my brother's children will join. Still studying or at school, but it's good. One of the kids is interesting.
It's one of the things that I always say is that it's one of the privileges of a wine business and a vineyard such as yours, a producer such as yours. You have the opportunity for multiple generations in things like Intel or pharmaceutical companies or even Coravin. There's a very low likelihood that my children will come into it. I think the wine's been with us for 8,000 years, and it's been in bottle with corks for 400 years. And that means that there is an opportunity. And of course, in Burgundy, it's been for thousands of years. And so it's this opportunity to have multiple generations of a family. And that provides this opportunity of passing down this knowledge that you have of your grapes, of your vines, of the ways that you make the wine, that is really unique to, there are very few businesses that have been around as long and so multi-generational as a winery. I saw a bakery in Graz, Austria that had been there since 1534. And so I think we've all needed bread and we've all needed wine for a long time. So congratulations on convincing or having a daughter who wanted to do it. One of the questions I wanted to ask was, you make great Chardonnay, some of the world's best. You make great Pinot Noir. There is Cremant de Bourgogne. Have you ever thought of making a sparkling wine? Would you ever make a sparkling wine? Have you ever made a sparkling wine? And I just am not informed.
No, I have never made a sparkling wine. And actually, the maison, my grandfather, nobody has made a sparkling wine. So to answer your question, we thought about it, but it's a true expertise to do it. So I think it takes probably a little bit of time. So if we were to make it, I don't want to delegate and say, okay, make it and we'll just stick our label, because normally we do everything. Yeah. So in the long term, why not? In the short term, no, we don't have plans to make a sparkling wine. I think we leave this in the hands of people who are very, very good at it. I don't think we would be that good to start with, but we would learn, of course. And yeah, no.
That's probably a wise move. I'm always the one who jumps into to things that I know nothing about. One of the things that you're struggling coming up with a name for your wines. Coravin was a very difficult naming process. I mean, I should share an embarrassing list of all the names we did not choose along the way. But moving from wine mosquito, which clearly is a bad name, to Coravin, which I attribute to the Latin roots, which is getting at the heart of wine. Cor is the Latin for heart, and I work in medicine, and vin is wine, obviously. So getting at the heart of wine for me was the variety. It's being able to taste 3-4 different wines like we are, experience all that this wonderful, simple plant can deliver in its symbiotic relationship with a human being.
It's a wonderful name. And Greg, I have a question for you. And I saw the question, is there something new coming from Coravin that we should anticipate? And the question was also, are you developing something for Champagne?
Ah, yes. Well,
For champagne, sparkling wine, in sparkling
yeah,
wine.
sparkling wine, exactly. Very difficult. And we're not allowed to use anything with the word champagne in it. We once had a champagne colored Coravin, and we got a cease and desist order from Champagne. So you're very cautious about the use of that
Yeah.
name. When I founded Coravin with the original folks, some of whom are still there, many of them are still there, we said we're going to be faster, easier, more fun than my prototype, obviously. And that we're going to work with any closure, so screw cap, vino lock, cork, whatever. And actually with Pivot, that has helped us, right? That's our avenue to work with sake bottles, with T-tops on sherry, to whiskeys. We've seen people using Pivot and other distilled alcohols. So it's now independent of closure. As long as it's got a glass neck, it'll work. And then the last thing that I said was still or sparkling. And when I said that, I thought it was going to be easier than it was. Sparkling is insanely hard. The most difficult wine to preserve with Coravin when I was testing my different prototypes was Burgundy. And it was both a curse and a blessing. The curse was it was not inexpensive to test. And the blessing was I got to learn about Burgundy. Because I had to do all these blind tastings, so it was spectacular. And I have to say that sparkling is the same, is a curse and a blessing. It is very difficult to preserve every aspect of a sparkling wine. Most people will say, I have a wine preservation system. You'll still be willing to drink the bottle in a week, right? It's not that it tastes the same. It's that you're willing to drink it. You're at some dividing line between throwing it away and drinking it. And with Coravin, that's not what we want. We want the last glass to be just as good as the first, whenever it is you choose to drink it. And with sparkling, that is an enormous challenge, absolutely enormous challenge. But we are up to that challenge, and I'm now more and more confident. So the one thing that I would be doing if I was free to travel is to travel the world of sparkling wine producers. And just like I met you in 2013 before we had launched in France, I would travel to the winemaker with the prototypes that we have for sparkling, because I think we're at that point where we want them to tell us whether or not it works. That's where we are with that. So I guess the answer is yes and yes. Is there something new? Yes. Is it sparkling? Yes. There's going to be more new from us, of course, as we go. But the goal will always be the same: faster, easier, more fun. The wine lasts longer. The last glass is as good as the first. Independent of closure, still or sparkling. There are some other things that we might do to try to demonstrate what Coravin does. There's a lot of virtual tastings like this that have been happening, which is wonderful. And a lot of wineries have been selling Coravin along with the packs of wine that they're doing virtual tastings with. And I have to say that in its own guilty way, the pandemic has done really well for Coravin. We've all over the world been used at home, I think, because wine is a positive part of the quality of life. And we've been trapped and unable to see friends and family for so long, but to be able to share a glass of wine in the distance, or two or three, has expanded dramatically. And maybe this will continue post-pandemic. I think it will.
Yeah, I think it will. I agree. And for us, it has been so nice, and it is really keeping the connection between us and our customers and our friends. I got so many lovely pictures or emails or texts and say, Vero, we had a glass of this wine and this wine, and it just makes me so happy.
Yeah, you produce something that makes other people happy, right? Wine is a part of the quality of life. And, I can imagine so many people's lives being so much harder without what you do over this last year. I know your wines have kept me happy. We've generally Coravin them until they're gone. I think that's the only downside of the pandemic. We drank every one of the whites you produce. It's all gone. So I have to reload on which is not a problem to have. But let's see, what do you recommend the maximum time to finish one bottle of wine, one glass that's been tapped with the Corvin systems. If it's with the timeless system, the longest blind tasting was 14 years. So, but I would say you can safely go 5 years. That was my spec. When I developed Corvin, was I couldn't blind taste the difference between one that had been Corvin 5 years ago and a bottle from the same case that was just touched. So that's the longest I go with Corvin standard. With my belief is 5 years at minimum. I go longer, like I did with this last wine. I'm going to try Louise from 2006, which I'm looking forward to tasting. And then with Pivot, I would do a month and keep it on side, keep it cold. It lasts longer. Us at Corvin, once we've started something, we'll keep going. And so we've learned a lot about materials that make a big difference. And we've learned a lot about it through sparkling. So I think with suffering and pain and struggle, sometimes better ideas come. And so I think you're going to see an evolution in the Pivot stopper. They're inexpensive and they'll stay that way because I want you having as many bottles as possible. And if I could make the wine last a year, 2 years, 5 years, I will with the Pivot. Why not? It's closure like a cork. Can we make it last as long? So I have to free up one of my glasses, and it's very difficult to decide which one I want to finish, but I can always taste more to have a sip of this wine. So your wine was one of the wines, became one of the wines as a result of my friend Glenn giving me this half case of Magnums. By the way, they were half Lorraine and half Louise when he gave them. So three Magnums of each, which was a tremendous gift.
He's a really nice friend, I have to say. He's a very, very nice friend. Because Cuvée Louise it's the cherry on the pie. Cuvée Louise is my best wine. This one is only available to the wine club members. And to make the Louise, it's the selection of the selection. It's really I would say the most refined of the wine we produce. Not necessarily the biggest, the most ample. Lorraine would get a bit more ampleness, but Louise, I really go. I mean, of course, I love Musigny from Chambol or Les Amoureuses, and that is certainly a village that inspires me a lot. And so, really, for Louise, I'm looking for this fabulous level of elegance.
Yeah, almost where you have the hair stand up on your skin when you taste it. There's an electricity to your wines, and reds and whites, but Lamouche, when I taste that every year with you at La Pollet, every single time, I wonder what is a bad vintage to you, because they're just over and over again, they're spectacular. Somebody said something funny. We conducted our own test. 1 year still good. Couldn't go 5 years. We like the wine too much. I agree. That's the biggest problem. Like I just wiped out the Turin in my fridge over the course of the pandemic. It's absolutely the case. Somebody asked, how long can you leave the needle through? I have a very good friend who's using a prototype, and he used to leave the needle through the cork for hours, deciding whether or not he wanted another glass before he moved to the next. I don't recommend it, but it is one of the reasons I chose argon gas as one of the gases, or as the gas. It is heavier than air and totally inert, and the needle is narrow, so it's not very open. And so you can actually leave the needle through the cork as long as the wine doesn't have dissolved gases in it that make it sort of spritzy on the palate. Then it's safe to leave the needle through the cork for a while. The only downside is that it takes longer for the cork to reseal. Cork is one of its beautiful things is that it's a biological material, and it, like any biological material, the more it sits in one place, the longer it takes to go back. So give it some time to close if you've left the needle through the cork. Somebody asked about wax and using Corvin on wax. Obviously, Pivot, there's not a worry. With the new models that have smart clamps, I find the best way to work with wax is actually to hold the clamp and push it down separately, and then to push the needle through. I'm gonna clear my needle before
I agree. That works well. On the wax, I have no problem with the Coravin. And when you talk about the gas, the argon gas, also something which is nice today because it's Thursday. The argon doesn't affect the ozone.
Yes.
Which is very nice.
Your cork is a little long, and so I've got to use my vintage needle because it's a little bit longer.
I thought you were out
I
of
almost
gas.
got through. Hold on one second, I've got it right here.
And Margaret, thank you for your comment. She said the wines are delicious and affordable. Well, we try to, because we want the wines to so people can enjoy it. Pinot Noir is expensive to produce. Sometimes people forget about that because of the density of the vines. One time I tried to estimate, but each vine gets about 30 times some attention. So if you multiply that by the number of vines per acre or per hectare, it's a lot of attention. So it is a costly variety to produce. So it's very difficult to find cheap Pinot Noir because unless it's produced in a sort of a bit industrial way. But we certainly want people to be able to afford. It's the question of.
Which is a very honorable thing that you are doing. I think there's more demand for your wines than there is supply, and especially with global demand. The introduction, the discovery of Burgundy by China led to, and Hong Kong in particular, where your wines are enjoyed tremendous. Obviously, the cuisine in Hong Kong and the wines of Burgundy pair so beautifully together. One of my favorite things in going to Hong Kong is to bring one of your bottles to a dim sum restaurant, because they don't have corkage fees, because they're not expecting you to come with a nice bottle of wine, and as long as you give them a glass, right, you can sit there and at dim sum, and both your Burgundies as well as your Oregon Pinot Noirs are excellent. Really, really
Thank you. Well,
really,
I'm anxious to hear how it's tasting, because that's quite extraordinary.
Oh yeah, it's been a long time. It smells fantastic.
Wow.
Oh, no, it's, you know what, the great thing about wine is memory, and I have not had this wine in 3 years, but the time that I started drinking it back in 2012, I had just founded the company, and the surgeon was one of my first investors, and still is a Series A investor in my startup company at that time. And all he saw was my prototype, and he invested quite extensively. So we're still very close. Now we can't exchange gifts because he's a surgeon using my spinal implant. Back then I wasn't approved, but I'm not allowed to do anything with him. So when we go out to dinner, he buys me wine, which is great. Our friendship is limited by our commercial relationship with each other now. But I remember the smell and the taste, and not the surprise, but the joy at finding another region that was producing the wine, Pinot Noir wine that I loved, in a way that was so elegant and so fantastic, but not Burgundy. And I think that's true of New Zealand as well. New Zealand is not Burgundy, but it's great Pinot Noir. Tasmania is not Burgundy. Adelaide Hills is not Burgundy, but it's great Pinot Noir, or very good Pinot Noir. So and I'm getting the same memory from smelling this glass. That sort of brings me back to when I was tasting it. And I got to taste it with him at a conference, because I took this bottle to him.
Wow, that's nice.
It's the same electricity. It's got such great acid. Oh, but the fruit is really lovely on this wine. This is an 06, so it's 15 years old. Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. This wine's going to age forever. What is the difference in the aging of your wines in Burgundy and your wines in Oregon? Do you find that there's a different trajectory, or are there different periods of dumbness? Wow, that's so delicious. I want to pour myself more. Really good. I'm trying to concentrate here. It actually makes me a little emotional. It's really wonderful to taste. And at the time I didn't know you, right? I just knew the surgeon, and I didn't know wines of Oregon, and then this is it really brings me back. It's fantastic.
Wow. That's makes me touch me a lot. Like I'm really very, very happy, and that's the whole thing about making wine. Hopefully we deliver some
But is there a difference in the aging of wines from Burgundy and from Oregon?
When we first started to make wine in Oregon, we had no idea how these wines would age, because the soil is so different, and we had no experience. And we tried some Oregon Pinots, but nothing was really old. And I have to admit that I've been amazed, and my father has been amazed to see how well they age. So the answer would be they do age equally well. both Burgundy, because now if we go to 88, it is my oldest one, so it's not as the 50s and the 40s we can find in Burgundy, but that one is still absolutely delicious, and I think still will go. So it's very good news that they do have aging capacity, and they just develop this beauty, aromatics of older Pinot. They don't, they change like a Burgundy Pinot. But and I would say probably if they go in the same direction, it would be hard, blind, and even young. It's not always easy, but they just go to where Pinot Noir goes when it gets older. It's fabulous.
Well, I hope that the two of us have the opportunity to age as gracefully and as wonderfully as your wines do. You obviously have, and I hope to be able to do the same, and that we can enjoy an experience like this again and again and again. The wine that you make is part of so many people's lives on a daily basis. We're all lucky to be able to drink these wines that you guys make at Domaine Drouhin in Oregon, and also in Maison in Burgundy. And I think we're all very lucky to get to know you a little bit more through this webinar. I've really enjoyed it, and thank you for making Corvin part of your Earth Day. And I can't wait to visit your tree in Colonel post planting. It seems somehow a little bit more contributory than my electric car. But I live in the city, so I think planting a tree here is illegal without approval from the city. Somebody's asked, yeah. If you were going to end today's webinar, this is a great question that Travis has asked. What do you still have left to achieve?
What do I still have left to achieve?
Yeah, if there was something more that you're working on, something that is a goal that you would love to achieve, is there something there?
My goal will be to pass on to my daughter the knowledge I have, and hopefully she will still pick knowledge from her grandfather. My father was still alive and has so much to teach her. So yes, what I have to achieve is the transmission of my little knowledge, and help guide her to, hopefully she guides the Drouhin family to something new, something different, but hopefully she will remain with the same values. So that's
I trust and believe in your success in that. And my son's birthday was yesterday. My older son Cord turned 25, so I plan on sending him not a case of magnums, but at least a magnum of one of your wines for him to celebrate. Luckily, he's picked up the wine bug, and he loves it, and he's studying it while he does his virtual reality stuff. So thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you to everybody who participated in today's event. I hope you had a chance to taste through these wines like we did, and that you continue to do so, and that maybe one day you do a comparison between Oregon and Burgundy, same vintage. It'll be fun to do. I know I'm going to do that. I hope you enjoy your Earth Day, everyone, and that Corvin can be a part of your life and hopefully make you happy as well. So thank you, Veronique. Thank you for everything.
No, thank you very much, Greg, and thank you to your team, and thank you to my team. It has been a real pleasure, delight to see you and to go through these wines with you. Cheers.
Same here. I'll see you in New York, California, or Oregon, or Burgundy.
Or Burgundy, somewhere. Cheers. Cheers to everybody. Cheers to Lone. I saw that Lone page was asking questions, and he's dear friends of the Dreyfus team. So cheers to everybody.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.